The next thing I want to talk about Islam is the accusation by a Muslim apologist, and I met John Fontaine, who's a Muslim apologist, in Manchester, and he came up to me and we had a little discussion, and I said there was eyewitness material in the Gospels and in the New Testament, and he said no, there isn't. And it struck me when he left, I had a question for him and Muslims. But let's turn to 1 John chapter 1 verse 1. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled of the word of life. For the life was manifested, and we have seen it, and bear witness, and show unto you that eternal life which was with the Father, and was manifest unto us. So John Fontaine and Muslim apologists will say there is no eyewitness material in the New Testament. But here it's quite clearly stated that there is eyewitness material. Okay? And we can see that there is eyewitness material within the Gospels, within the epistles, because there are certain planks of information that are given that corroborate with all this information, and that is, number 1, Jesus died on a cross, number 2, there was an empty tomb, and number 3, the early church had a belief in the resurrection of Jesus. These are 3 facts. You don't have to believe in the resurrection of Jesus to believe that historically that's what the church was preaching. Now these are 3 grand historical facts, which shows that there was some based on some eyewitness material for those 3 grand facts to be based. Now I can go into pretty intricate and deep scholarship about eyewitness materials in the Gospels, but I'm going to leave it there. But here's the point. Here's the point. If you read the New Testament, it's rooted in 1st century Judaism. The architecture of Jerusalem of the time of Jesus, the culture of the time of Jesus, is reflected perfectly, accurately within this New Testament, which shows you that this was written by people who lived near the time of Jesus, unquestionably. So here's the question to John Fontaine and to Muslim apologists. How much eyewitness material of Jesus is in the Quran? Now there's a question for you. How much eyewitness material about Jesus is in the Quran? Be very interesting to find out. Let me know, John, and let me know, Muslims, because it's very hypocritical of a Muslim apologist like John Fontaine or any Muslim to come to me and say that there is no eyewitness material about Jesus in the New Testament when it was at the written in the culture and the time of Jesus, or around the culture of the time of Jesus. People who knew that culture are reflected in this book, in these books. And then it's hypocritical to say there is no eyewitness material within the New Testament, and then we say, okay, well, what about the Quran? Well, the Quran came 600 years after Jesus, so what eyewitness material is in that? The Gospel of Mark was written about 60 AD. Scholars will agree with that. If you go for a later date, 70 AD. The Gospel of Luke, Matthew was 70 AD. Gospel of Luke was 70 AD, maybe 80 AD. The Gospel of John was 90 AD. Putting people who wrote those books could have known Jesus. I believe they did know Jesus, apart from Luke, who knew Paul. But the writers either did know Jesus or did know people who knew Jesus, would be more accurate about Jesus' life than the Quran that comes 600 years later, that doesn't even have any eyewitness material whatsoever. The other question that I'd like to ask John Fontaine and any Muslim apologist who would take up the challenge is this: how much of 1st century Judaism does the Quran understand? Be interesting to take all the statements that the Quran makes of the 1st century Judaism and see if the statements are accurate and reflect that culture. That's a study that I need to do. But maybe a Muslim apologist can save me the time and show me, because if you compare the Gnostic Gospels with the four Gospels reflect the 1st century Judaism accurately. The Gnostic Gospels do not. Now the Gnostic Gospels came in the 2nd century AD. The Quran comes 600 years after, not 200 years after like the Gnostic Gospels. So it'd be interesting to see how accurate the Quran is compared with the Gnostic Gospels and the Gospels. Will some Muslim apologists take up the challenge? Thank you for listening and take care.